Hi, and welcome to New England Cooks. My name is Chef Stefano Coppola, and this is The Deli, our little segment on New England Cooks. Today we're going to be preparing several dishes. The theme today is going to be preservation. So, this time of year, in springtime in Vermont, we don't get a lot of growing season here. So we definitely want to utilize everything that we can grow to the fullest extent. Preservation is a great way of doing that. If you have, too much of a particular, crop or vegetable, being able to preserve it throughout the season, and especially here in Vermont in the winter, there's not much to choose from. So being able to open up your cupboard or fridge and grabbing something that reminds you of that fresh, summer vegetable or fruit, whatever it may be, is something that's very special. And, historically, this is how people survived, is by eating these types of food and making these types of products to sustain themselves throughout the year. So the first dish that we're going to put together is going to be strawberry rhubarb preserves. Classic preserves. We like ours a little bit chunky. Rhubarb is one of the first springtime vegetables that we see here in New England, and it's something that I personally get really excited about when it pops up, because then summer's coming, spring is on it, going through all the changes, and things are actually starting to grow, and we're able to produce food for ourselves. So I'll get right into it. We got some very nice strawberries here. These strawberries, I believe, are from Florida. Right now in Florida, it's the height of strawberry season. We won't see that here in Vermont probably for another month and a half, maybe even 2 months, depending on the weather. But these strawberries are pretty nice. What you look for when you're shopping for strawberries is making sure that the red goes all the way over the strawberry, that there's no like white spots, or green spots would be the worst. And once you cut into it, you should be able to smell that essence of strawberry. These guys are pretty juicy, pretty plump, and in the recipe, I say to halve the strawberries. If they're really big like this, you can quarter them, but it's really up to you, your personal preference. Depending on whether you like your preserves nice and chunky like I do, or kind of smooth. There's a lot of things you can do to influence the texture and final product. Some people don't like the little seeds in there and strain those out. I like knowing what I'm eating. Like if I'm eating a preserves on a piece of toast, I like to see a little chunk of rhubarb in there, or strawberry, and I think that adds to the whole presentation and experience of eating these preserves. Looking down the recipe, you might see a couple things that you might think are a little bit weird. I put balsamic vinegar in my strawberries. That's kind of becoming a commonplace thing in the culinary world now. A couple things that aren't so commonplace: freshly ground black pepper and salt. Whenever I cook anything that's going to be sweet, I always put a little bit of salt in there. It kind of doesn't really balance out the flavors, but it kind of like brings out the essence of the strawberry a little bit more, so it's not cloyingly sweet or just too sweet. It really kind of keeps it on an even keel. And then black pepper, I think it's just something fun to put in there. The flavor of black pepper goes really well with strawberries, and will complement the tartness of the rhubarb as well, and just gives it like that something extra that you can't really put your finger on if you're not the person that made it. Just makes it a little bit more interesting. So getting into the recipe here. After you cut your strawberries and your rhubarb, rhubarb comes in stalks like this. These are definitely not from Vermont, but the rhubarb that we do see in Vermont here, which I actually used for the recipe, you can see the diameter is a little bit skinnier. They're not as big right now. Probably in maybe a week or two, we'll be seeing nice fat rhubarb like this around here as well. So rhubarb is pretty easy to clean up. Make sure it's washed, obviously. And then you'll see the end pieces do have like a little bit of discoloration where they come to the bottom of the plant. I usually just cut those off. if I'm cooking at home, I'll throw these in there. But in a restaurant setting, or if you're looking to have something a little bit more refined, just seeing that in there probably wouldn't be too appetizing. But you definitely want to get all the leaves off. The leaves of the rhubarb plant will cause you a little bit of indigestion if you try to eat them. So what you're left with is this nice, ruby red going into a darker red down here. And this is all the good stuff. You can see that one stalk here is much thicker than the other, so I'm trying to get everything to be kind of uniform. So I'm going to cut down this one, and then we're just going to kind of try to get nice little squares. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't even have to be this perfect, because as you'll see later on, once we start cooking this rhubarb down, it's going to really just kind of fall apart and become the sauce that everything is held by. You'll see some little fibers in there, these preserves cook down for a good amount of time. Probably 45 minutes or so, and by the end of the cooking period, these will not look like this at all. So everybody into the pot. Get our rhubarb in there, get our strawberries in there. And we're going to get our sugar, 4 cups or 1 quart of sugar, right on in there. All right, and we can put everything else that's in the recipe in here right at the start. The one thing that we're going to keep out is the lemon juice. Lemon juice, as you cook it down, definitely changes in flavor. I like the freshness of lemon juice, and so trying to keep that is kind of key for this, because you'll see that at the end of the cooking of this recipe, the rhubarb strawberry preserves, it's going to have a very deep, sultry flavor. And the lemon juice will kind of brighten it up a little bit and give it that like freshness factor. You'll see that the vanilla bean that I'm using, I split it right down the middle. I'm kind of trying to get all the seeds out of there, but I'm not worrying about it too much, because this whole guy is going right on in there. And with the long cooking time, all the flavor is going to come out of there. All the seeds are probably going to come out as well. So we got that. We got our salt, a little bit of salt, and black pepper. Everybody in the pot. Then we're going to turn this on. You can turn it on high to start, just to get everything going a little bit quicker. But you really want to keep your eye on it. At this point, if you're on high heat for too long without stirring, you will scorch the bottom, and that's going to give you some bitter flavors, and eventually it's just going to ruin it altogether. And then we're going to put our balsamic vinegar in there, which I'm going to talk about a little bit as well. So in a recipe like this, the quality of the balsamic vinegar does matter. I wouldn't use your very expensive 12 to 20-year-old delicious syrupy balsamic vinegar. This is kind of middle of the road. 8-year-old balsamic, I think, is perfect for this recipe. I wouldn't use the cheap stuff either. It's a little bit too acidic and a little bit too sharp of a flavor. It'll overcome some of these other flavors that are in the pot. So yeah, it's something around 5 to 8 year balsamic, relatively cheap, not going to break the bank. I think it's perfect for this type of recipe. So we're going to go for about 1/4 cup. All right. And then just keep this stirring every once in a while, just to make sure you're not scorching on the bottom. And as this cooks down, a couple things are going to happen. Your sugar is going to melt. That's going to give you the liquidy consistency of the preserves. Also, all the liquid that's in the rhubarb and in the strawberries is also going to start coming out. That's what's going to create your sauce. And then as we reduce that, the juices, the water in the juices evaporating is going to concentrate the flavor. All of the liquid in here kind of evaporating, and the sugar in here is going to help thicken your preserves. And A lot of recipes you'll see for preserves, jams, and jellies will include pectin. I don't use any pectin in this recipe because we're cooking it for a long enough period of time that things are going to break down, and all the natural pectin in this stuff, which rhubarb has a lot of pectin in it actually, is going to be what kind of congeals these preserves as they cool. So there's no need for the added pectin in this recipe at all, which is nice. All right, so we're gonna let this simmer here, like I said, for about 45 minutes. It really depends on, the quality of your vegetables and fruits that you're using in here, the water content, some other factors, your heat source. There's a lot of factors that'll go into how long this needs to cook. Also personal preference. Some people like their preserves to be kind of loose and pourable. Others, like myself, I like a very kind of gelled, stiff preserves that you can kind of pick up with a spoon, plop on a piece of toast, and it'll just stay right like that. So that's my personal preference, and that's where we're gonna go with this one today. Okay, so before we start our next recipe, I did want to come back to our preserves just for a moment. At this point, they've been simmering for probably about 20 minutes now, and you can see how much liquid the rhubarb and the strawberries have given off. If I pick it up here, you can hardly see the rhubarb anymore. The strawberries have become very soft, still holding their shape. But everything is kind of becoming homogenized, and your sugar's all melted at this point, and the liquid is reducing. So this is exactly what you want to see. And we're going to let this go probably for at least another 20 minutes, if not for a half hour. And really let the water evaporate and the flavors really condense and get nice and happy in here. So we're gonna let that go for a little bit while longer. We're gonna start our next recipe. It's our MBD, Morse Block Deli, cabbage sauerkraut. So just like kimchi, sauerkraut is a way of preserving vegetables. Sauerkraut traditionally hails from Germany, and it's kind of their style of kimchi. We use red cabbage. A lot of times you'll see green cabbage. I think that's a little bit more popular for the dish. But red cabbage will give you a really nice color. Pretty much the same flavor, unless you get into some of the heirloom types of cabbage, but really it's just about the color. So first step is going to be halving and coring the cabbage. These cores can just go straight into the compost. And when I slice the cabbage, I'm going to be using the mandolin again. Great tool, saves a lot of time. And when I cut cabbage, I like to see kind of like this cross section of the cabbage. If you slice it this way, you'll get some pieces that are just this big, thick piece, and some pieces that are just these little thin, pieces here. If you slice it this way, you'll get a nice cross section, and it'll not only look a lot nicer, but if you have some big fat pieces and some little skinny pieces, they're definitely going to break down at different rates. And so this just keeps everything really kind of consistent and homogenized. We're going to take off these gnarly outer layers again, just like we did with our Napa cabbage. Go right in the compost. And then we can just start shredding our cabbage. So as you can see, getting some nice pieces here. This is that cross section I was telling you about. It's really nice. You can see, exactly what your cabbage looked like, and texturally, it'll be really nice to eat. So we're gonna just bust down this entire cabbage. And be careful when you're using the mandolin. Many a cook's fingers have been taken by the teeth of the mandolin. Once you get down to a piece where you're not really comfortable slicing anymore, you can, just put it on your cutting board, slice the rest by hand. No shame in that. So I'm down there pretty much where I want to stop. And I'll take my blade to the rest of it. All right. And again, just like we did when we were making the kimchi, this recipe is like we had a couple of other flavorings in there, but classic sauerkraut is nothing but cabbage and salt and thyme. So at the deli, we kind of spike up our sauerkraut and make it a little bit more interesting by adding some apples, which is a very Vermont product, and some caraway seeds. These caraway seeds have already been toasted. You always want to toast your seeds before you use them, especially in a dish like this where we're going to leave the seeds whole. If you're not toasting your seeds, you're really not getting your money's worth. Toasting the seeds brings out a lot of the essential oils and the aromatics in the seed. It also kind of transforms the flavor to be a little bit deeper, a little bit more substantial. So always toast your seeds. The apple, we don't need to core it, we don't need to peel it, none of that. We're basically just going to cut this on the mandolin as well. And once you start getting down to your core, once you see that, you want to stop and then rotate. All right. Then after you have your apple slices, you can kind of fan those out on your board, and we're going to make little matchsticks, just like we did with the carrot from the kimchi. All right. Now the apple, not only is it going to add depth of flavor and a little bit of sweetness to this, after the sauerkraut is finished fermenting, the apple almost disappears in the sauerkraut. So it really is nice to have something that again gives you that little I know there's something else in here, but can't really put my finger on it. Makes it a little bit more interesting for anybody eating it. All right. And then our caraway seeds go right on in there whole. We're not going to grind them or anything. They will soften up as this dish ferments. And then salt, our final ingredient. So just like the kimchi, same basic procedure. We're going to get all our salt in there, massage the vegetables and fruit down, and again, just waiting for all that liquid to be exuded from the cells of the produce. And just like the kimchi, the more you massage it, the better off you'll be. You'll get more liquid out faster. And the one difference between this and the kimchi, obviously the pieces are a lot smaller. We've shredded the carrot and the cabbage into much smaller pieces than those chunky pieces of Napa cabbage or scallion. So this process will be a lot quicker. When we make our huge 5-gallon batches of sauerkraut at the deli, we usually let this process just go about 12 hours or overnight. All right. And then after that point, just like the kimchi again, we're going to pull it out, really squeeze it, and get as much of that liquid out as possible. Stuff it into your sanitized jar, leaving as little headroom as possible. And making sure that none of the vegetable or produce in the jar is touching any air. So in the same way of the kimchi, whatever liquid is left, you can use that, and if you don't have enough of that, you can make a little bit of extra brine. In the sauerkraut recipe, you'll see the brine recipe. It's basically 2% solution of water and salt. And after you get that all pushed down in there, if you need to use it, just top it off with the smallest amount possible, just so that it's covering the stuff that's in the jar. And pop your top on, and same deal. In a dark, moderately tempered space, again, I really like the bottom of the sink. We'll or a cupboard or wherever. Sauerkraut at the deli, we let this go for anywhere between 5 and 7 weeks. We really like to get a nice deep, almost funky flavor to the sauerkraut, funky in a good way. We use most of our sauerkraut at the deli for making our Reuben. So, our corned beef that we make in-house is very, very flavorful. We use a nice locally produced rye bread from La Panciata. And all of those flavors are very, very strong, including the maple stout mustard and sharp Swiss cheese that we use in that dish. So having a strongly flavored sauerkraut with those other strong flavors really makes everything kind of balanced out together, and a great final product. This sauerkraut, super flavorful. You can eat it right out of the jar, and it's delicious with crackers or cheese or whatever. You can really have fun with it. And we're flavoring it additionally with some apple and some caraway seed. You can try some other spices in there. There's even I brought along a little jar of what's called curtido, and curtido is the Latin American cousin of sauerkraut. This curtido here, you can see we used the green cabbage. We also added some shredded carrots, some jalapeno peppers, and some Fresno chilies. This is a beautiful, beautiful thing to pop out of your cupboard in the middle of winter and throw on your taco. I don't even eat tacos anymore without curtido. I love this stuff. It's really, really good. But really, it's just a Latin American style of sauerkraut or kimchi. So as you can see, all of these products that we've created today all utilize, with the exception of the preserves, all utilize this fermentation technique where it's a heavy salting to remove moisture, the addition of some flavor, elements of flavoring, and sterile environment for your product to ferment and produce those really delicious umami flavors that you really can't get from fresh vegetables. Really creates something that's more than the sum of its parts, which is what I love about this technique. So try it out. Use these recipes as kind of a baseline or a starting off point, and really try to explore fermentables and use what's in your garden, and really try to live off of that as long as you can. Number one, it saves you money. Number two, it's really cool just to be able to grow your own food, especially in this day and age. And number three, it's something you can bust out in the middle of the winter and really, wow, your guests, or just sit on the couch and munch on some delicious curtido. All right, so we're going to be finishing up our rhubarb and strawberry preserves now. If you look inside the pot here, you can see how much this is reduced. Our original line was right about here, right up here, and it's definitely reduced by almost half at this point. Normally, I'd like to see this reduce a little bit more, but you'll see once this cools down how much these preserves are going to congeal and tighten up into that classic, like, jammy consistency. So one tricky part is actually, when is this done? That's kind of something that has been in trouble for me in the past, as well as I know other cooks. Taking something off the heat, storing it, and putting it in the fridge, and then opening it when you're ready to use it, only to find out that it is way too liquidy and not really what you were looking for. So one little trick that I do know that can kind of help you out in gauging is this done is very simple. You take a little plate, pop it right in the fridge, let it get nice and cold, and once you're contemplating is this done, you can take a little bit out. Take your cold plate, put it on the cold plate, and put the plate back in the fridge. That will allow this small amount that you put on the plate to cool down very, very quickly, so you can see, is this what I'm looking for? So I've come prepared with a finished product of the strawberry rhubarb preserves, and I've placed them on a plate in here. And as you can see, it doesn't spread very much. It's pretty tight. kind of sitting up, almost in a mound. And this, for me, is the perfect consistency. You can still see there's little, tiny pieces of rhubarb, some little pieces of strawberry, so still got some chunkiness to it. You know what you're eating, you can see what you're eating. And I think the flavor at this point is what you're looking for, that classic strawberry rhubarb flavor. You can still see there's some big hunks of strawberries in there. You can see all the fibers from the rhubarb, and it is delicious. A little English muffin with some butter on it. That's breakfast, as far as I'm concerned. So, all of these preservation techniques are just the tippity tip of the iceberg. There's so much more in the world of preservation and fermentation. I encourage you to check it out a little bit more. I'll definitely be back and show you some more techniques and dishes utilizing preservation and being able to really hone in on being able to grow your own food and preserve your own food. It's a very cool thing to do. It gives me a lot of pleasure doing it and sharing it with other people. So really go out there and explore different recipes, explore different types of produce, and have fun with it. That's all I have for you today. Thank you very much, and come check us out next time you're in Vermont.